to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. And if it's Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, it means it is time for our weekly joint live stream. So welcome, Peter. How are things in Moscow? What's the weather
Well,
like?
you see me smiling because,
The sun is out.
because the live stream works. So that makes me happy. Okay. And yes, spring is making itself known. We're getting a lot of sun, which, I don't know how many places in the world where you just have people standing outside looking up at, maybe not looking at the sun, but, closing your eyes and just
Right.
standing there. It happens a lot here. I do it. Okay. I need the sun.
Yeah, well, you get these long winters, and then it's such a
Well, look at
relief.
me.
Yeah,
I'm the palest guy that ever walked the earth. Come on.
yeah. I mean, here, you get it's one day the sun is out, and then suddenly you get 2, 3 days, grim, gray, cloudy, misery. So it's like one step forward, 3 steps backwards. So spring still is far away.
Well, no, I think I would even say today kind of marks real spring. Okay. So it's the middle of the month in April. Wow.
Right. And then, of course, you've got the Easter coming up next weekend, which is again now the Orthodox Easter and the Catholic Easter coincide. Doesn't often happen, but that's they coincide. So there's kind of an interesting developments that we have the feckless Europeans who seem really determined to be as provocative as possible with Russia. I mean, this is they're going out of their way. So last weekend we had another one of those meetings at the Ramstein air base. And they agreed on yet another one of these 21 billion euro package.
That they don't have, but anyway.
Yeah, I always wonder kind of where's all this where's all that where's this 21 billion coming from? But there's other developments, and which I want to get to, which is Friedrich Mertz, the incoming German chancellor, has said that he's not raising any objections to the transfer of the Taurus missile to Ukraine. Now, this is a bit of a problem because, yes, I mean you've already got the British and the French who have delivered these the Storm Shadow and whatever was it, the Scalp or whatever the French one was called. But this is Germany. And that does raise some red flags. But Mertz, who seems a man completely opportunistic and out of his depth, but he's determined to go ahead with it. So let's just look. I want to just show you.
Well, I mean, everybody. Before we do that. I mean, so why? Well, because Ukraine is losing, and so I guess he is a military brilliant strategist that this will turn the tide. Really?
Well,
what evidence is there of that?
Well, I wouldn't put it like that. I would put it that what they're trying to do is hamper Trump. I mean, this is they're absolutely obsessed with what Trump is doing, and they're determined really to thwart this. I mean, they absolutely determined everything that they can do to be as provocative and to create as many.
So what does this do for Ukraine? What does this do for Ukraine?
Nothing. It doesn't do anything.
Okay,
they're not concerned with that. Yeah.
Also, before we proceed, George, it looks like if we're going to play inside baseball, because that's exactly what the Europeans are doing, is that Keith Kellogg is their boy. Okay.
Yes.
He's their boy, and this is where it's coming to a head inside the Trump administration.
Yes.
We could talk about a lot of different topics.
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
Tariffs. Yeah. We could talk about Iran, and we could talk about Ukraine. We see the splits, the fragmentation, and so I don't know Keith Kellogg. He's never struck me as the lightest bulb in the ceiling here, but he seems to be channeling exactly what the Europeans want.
Yes.
Not an original thinker, I would
Right.
say.
Right. No, I think so. I mean, since you brought up Kellogg, I mean, let's take a look at Trump's presser aboard Air
Oh,
Force
you
One.
got my message. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So let's take a look at that. It was because it was quite um, interesting. So here he is. This is
Apparently,
yesterday.
that's 2:30 in the morning. Can you believe
Yes,
it?
yes. He has amazing. Does have amazing energy. Yeah. Anyway.
Reports that the Social Security Administration has classified thousands of immigrants as dead, even though they're still living.
That's what I hear. I mean, that's what has been reported to me. Dead and also very inaccurately. And from the standpoint of Social Security, it's a
So he's just finishing up on Social Security.
The strength of Social Security, when you take dead people out and all of the people that they're talking about that should not be in there, it's going to make our system much stronger. We're making Social Security stronger. The Democrats are destroying Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid also.
Yes. Do you have a reaction to Russia's Palm Sunday attack?
I think it was terrible, and I was told they made a mistake. But I think it's a horrible thing. I think the whole war is a horrible thing. I think the war is, for that war to have started, is an abuse of power. This country would have never allowed that war to have started if I were president. That war is a shame. Millions of people are dead that should be alive. Cities are being destroyed all over Ukraine. The whole culture is gone. It's very certainly very severely hurt. You know, the chapels, the churches, the spirals, all of the things that they had in Ukraine were among the most beautiful anywhere in the world. And most of them were knocked down and blown up into a million pieces. But most importantly, you have millions of people dead that shouldn't be dead. Think of it. Think of what a rigged election means. We would have had we wouldn't have had the war in Ukraine. We wouldn't have had the Russia-Ukraine situation. We wouldn't have had October 7th, Israel, the Middle East. We wouldn't have had inflation. We wouldn't have had the most embarrassing day.
Well, Trump, finally say it.
That's Afghanistan, one of the most embarrassing moments in the history of our country, Afghanistan. All of these things wouldn't have taken place. Think of it. We wouldn't have had inflation. But millions of people would be alive, except for the fact that the election were rigged, because that war would have never started, and Putin never would have started that war. Okay, any other questions?
You said they made a mistake in the attack? You said they made a mistake. You were told they made a mistake. Do you mean it was unintentional?
They made a mistake. I believe it was. Look, you're going to ask them. This is Biden's war. This is not my war.
That's all we need to hear.
For a very short period of time. This is a war that was under Biden. He gave him billions and billions of dollars. He should have never allowed, if he had any brain, which he didn't have and doesn't have, and now it's being proven, he wouldn't have allowed that war to start. I would have absolutely not, that war would never have taken place. But remember this is Biden's war. I'm just trying to get it stopped so that we can save a lot of lives. They happen to be Ukrainian and Russian lives. But all I want to do is get it stopped.
Witkoff, sir, did you meet with Mr. Witkoff today?
I did. I met with him, and he had some very good meetings on the Middle East, and he also had good meetings having to do with Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
Can you give us an update on Iran?
Well, we're going to be doing it very shortly. Iran also. It was another way. I met with a different group of people in Iran, and we'll be making a decision on Iran very quickly. Yeah, please.
Back on Russia, Ukraine, resolving that war has taken a little longer than you predicted. Can you pinpoint the reasons why?
It's a deeply seated war. And again, it's a war that people didn't expect would start. And in my administration, there was no chance that it would start, and it didn't. By the way, I went 4 years and it didn't start. People say, "Oh, well, how do you know?" Well, I know because I went 4 years and it didn't start. You would have never had that war. It would have never started. Putin never would have started it. I mean, I think, frankly, he had so little respect for Biden that he started it for that reason. And obviously, he didn't get along very well with Zelensky or anybody else, and now you have millions of dead people, and those people, every one of them should be alive right now.
Mr. President, do you react?
All right. So this is the the first time that he's actually ever spelled out that expression, this is Biden's war. He says this
Well,
is.
George, I think you and I said this a
Oh
year
yeah,
ago.
yeah, right. No, we absolutely did. We absolutely did.
And
But he has never said
we
that.
said that he should run on that.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's what we said. Now, this kind of relates to what you said about Kellogg. Now, if one sort of thinks about, look, it's a difficult situation. It's a complicated war. You're not going to get it done in 24 hours. You're not going to get it done in 5 weeks. It's going to take a lot of time. And and I was thinking of the Nixon years, the 1969 to 73. Yeah. Nixon said, "Oh, well, I'm going to bring this thing to an end." It took 4 years. Nixon tried all sorts of different things. He tried pressuring Hanoi. He tried pressuring Saigon. He had the Cambodia incursion. He had Laos incursion. He went to the Russians, asked for help from the Russians.
The Soviets. He went.
Yeah, exactly. The Chinese. You do a lot of different things. Eventually, it works out, and then he eventually got the deal. So there is something to be said that you just got to try things out. The problem is that with Kellogg in Ukraine, you're not getting what should be done, because you really got to have somebody there who's going to put pressure on Ukraine. You have to have somebody there absolutely putting
George,
pressure on
we
Ukraine.
heard over the last couple news cycles that finally a Biden-appointed ambassador to Ukraine is stepping down. Let me check the calendar. This is April. Wasn't Trump inaugurated in January?
Yeah.
I'm proving your point.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really the thing, and that's why I think Kellogg is they kind of pushed him aside. Kellogg was going to handle the whole brief. He was pushed out, shoved onto Ukraine, but he's obviously absolutely the wrong person there, because you have to have somebody there who is willing to put pressure on Ukraine, and particularly so given what the Europeans are up to. And so I want to just show you this latest batch of nonsense coming from Europe, which is here we have. So this is from the meeting last week from Ramstein. Allies pledged 21 billion euros in weapons for Ukraine while denouncing Russia's attacks. And then you have Pistorius, the German defense minister, saying peace in Ukraine is out of reach in the immediate future. He said Russia needs to understand that Ukraine is able to go on fighting, and we will support it. This is after this meeting. The record pledge of military assistance includes $4.5 billion from the UK, which the UK has committed for this year, as well as a further $11 billion from Germany. And then the summit held at NATO headquarters, blah, 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 after the US abandoned its leadership of the group. Nonetheless, Pete Hegseth participated via video link. And the Ukrainian defense minister insisted America was still the prime partner in the fight against Russia. But there was a broader concern about the future of the U.S. security role in Europe. Pistorius stressed the need for the continent to look on our own at what we can do, take on more responsibility as Europeans together with the UK. And then here we have the issue with Mertz. But as you can see, the Europeans are determined to keep the war going. Now, what they're trying, this is why they keep talking about this coalition of the willing. We're going to have to send our troops into Ukraine. The one problem they have there is that the British are being very skittish. I mean, Starmer says, "Yeah, well, fine, we're going to do it, but we need the American backup." What is that the word he uses? Backup or
backstop?
Backstop. That's the word. Yeah, backstop. Yeah, that's the word. The backstop. Well, in practical terms, and I mean, unless the Americans.
When I think of backstop, I think of like a little rubber
Yeah,
Those
I
things used to keep the door open. Okay,
is that what
like
is that what a backstop is? Yeah, I guess that is. Yeah, yeah. They keep keep things open, which means that the British are not going to do anything unless the Americans agree to this. And if the British don't do it, then the French are not going to do it. I mean, it's basically Macron is
and if the French don't do it, the Germans can't do it.
exactly. So that's that. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, with
Yeah,
once
but I mean, George, I mean, what I want your thoughts on this. This is a lot of hot air. They're talking about spending money they don't have. What they want to do, they're playing a marathon with Trump. They want to trip him up
yes,
because I don't all that reassurance and all the it's very difficult for me to pay much attention to it because it's just a plan to throw a wrench into all
yes,
of Trump's attempts, and they're not smart, but they're savvy. They
yes,
see this division with
right,
Witkoff and
yep.
Kellogg, and they're playing it.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right. Yep.
all this other stuff, coalition of the willing, we can do that. I think it's all hot air. I don't think they're serious about it at all. All they're trying to do is do because they have plenty of friends. The Europeans, I mean, they have plenty of friends across the pond.
Yes,
Plenty of
yes,
friends.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
and a lot of them are Republican senators.
The
Okay,
Republican, that's right, absolutely. Republican senators, Democrats, and they're kind of figuring we can just simply wear him out. We can just wear him out,
right.
and then he'll be gone, and they have a good idea about the political clock, the midterms coming up. That's about 18 months time. If Trump suffers setbacks, boom, he loses his prestige. He's still in charge of foreign policy, but he'll be damaged goods if he does poorly in
I
the.
don't. I'm not. I wouldn't say he's in charge of foreign policy. I think that's going too far. I think he has a preponderance of influence right now. But we're seeing.
No, no, I just meant in terms of like the executive. The executive still
Oh, okay.
runs foreign policy. No, you're
Because
absolutely right. No,
within
no,
his
no,
own
personally. No, not in
administration.
a personal way. No, 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 no. Yeah.
Look, I mean, it was it. Yeah, it was yesterday. Okay, Rubio and who else? Another came out in favor of Witkoff and all that. Well, I mean, if an article has to be written that the Secretary of State is backing, there's problem.
Right,
There's got to be a problem.
right,
Why would you write the story?
right,
Okay,
right.
and
No, no,
Marco Rubio is waiting for Witkoff to fall flat on his face. That's what
right,
he's waiting for.
right,
Okay,
right, right.
and as much as I think in their heart of hearts, I mean, this whole, and the New York Times spilled the beans a couple weeks ago. This has just been a catastrophe for everybody involved here. They're not going to give up on Iran, though. That's a total different kettle of fish. Okay, so I mean, there's so many pressure points working against Trump now, and I would blame him. He surrounded himself again with people. They're not going to do his bidding. And this also, this is, you brought up Nixon in Vietnam. This is, ending something like this is very difficult because you are supporting one side.
Right, right.
And that's what makes it so difficult because Nixon, you have to be pretty old or even talk to your parents and grandparents. How did Nixon make his name? He was a fanatical anti-communist, okay? And Tricky Dick did some nasty things, okay? Because he bolstered his credentials, okay? And my parents' generation loved him for that, okay? And so now Nixon inherited a war. It was Johnson's war, but it became Nixon's war. That's why George and I are talking about this.
Well,
How
that's
do
right.
you detach yourself from your proxy against the superpower without ending up with your tail between your legs?
Well, that's the thing, and but the reason I brought up Nixon is that he's still continually attacked. He was attacked at the time, and he's still continually attacked by liberals. Oh, he should have just simply picked up the stumps and walked away in January '69. But that never happens. I mean, nobody does that. You're the president of the United States. You can't just simply walk away So what he tried, he basically tried to do a lot of different things, hoping that something or other, or a combination of things, will eventually get the job done. And he had to do it. He applied pressure against Hanoi. He applied pressure against Saigon, and he went to Moscow, and he went to Beijing, and so on. And then finally, he got it done. But you have to think, okay, well, yeah, if it's a complicated war, there's nobody in history who just simply says, you know what, that's it, we're gonna walk out of here, and that's it. There's always, even De Gaulle who finally decided we're wasting daylight in Algeria. It still took him 4 years. He just didn't just get it done. You know what, that's it, I'm out of here. It took 4 years for him to withdraw from Algeria. So it does take time. But I think the problem with Trump is that he has to have then a clear focus of what he's doing. I mean, we can, I think one can give him certain latitude. All right, it's going to take a little bit of time. It's not going to be easy. But as long as you have your eyes on what you want to do.
Yeah, but George, I think a valid criticism is, Mr. Trump, who is your point person to end this conflict?
Right.
Marco Rubio, Witkoff, Kellogg, who should we listen to? Who has the preponderance of influence now? He needs to tighten that up.
Right.
He should fire Kellogg.
Yep.
Okay. Why does he need an envoy to Ukraine?
No, I don't understand.
Why?
No, I don't really understand that, and I don't quite see, if he's got Kellogg as his point person, sending him to Moscow, sending him to Oman, sending him to Tel Aviv, then why not send Kellogg to Kiev? I mean, absolutely say, I mean, if he can say to Kiev, now look, this is it, we can't go on, and you've got to make it real. You've got to make that threat real, that we're not going to go on bankrolling forever. So take whatever we're going to have to work out something now. You're under the pressure of time. But he's got to have it. Kellogg is not going to deliver that message. He has to get somebody to deliver the message. Look, time is running out. So this is
Kellogg
to do the deal.
Kellogg is the quintessential speed bump. That's that's his job. Now, what Trump has to do, and there will be he would have to expend political capital, no doubt. But what is Trump all about? George and I have talked about this on and offline. He wants a great reset in a good way, okay? Right. Not the Davos reset, but in the way he and his movement sees it. Reorganize the American economy, definancialize it, reindustrialize it. That's one pillar. A second pillar is the United States has to be smart about its foreign involvements, okay? And that includes, why do you need to have Russia as an enemy? Right. This is what the Biden people wanted. This is what the Obama people wanted. This is what they did. And he's absolutely right. Okay.
Right.
And third, he has to. What I think part of this great reset is a return to great power politics. Okay, which means make agreements and stick to them. Treat your major adversaries. Yes, they can be adversaries, but you can treat them with respect as well. Right. Okay, right. These are the major pillars that, and he needs to go through with it. Okay, for me to succeed in my agenda, we no longer need to have Russia as an enemy. It's a fierce competitor, yes, and we will keep our eye on it, on Russia and the Russians. But we don't need to be always on the premises of war. Okay, no, and he needs to start articulating that.
Yes, exactly right, and I think that he sees the issue here, particularly on the European continent, that this is part of NATO, and the way he presents it, and it's not quite true, but nonetheless, it's a useful model. Oh, we're being dragged into these conflict with Russia by Europe. It's not true, but nonetheless, he holds to that. Fine, if you want to hold to the position, hold to it. and there's no reason for it. And the Europeans who are dragging us into this conflict, they're not doing us any favors. In first place, they're not contributing anything to the NATO kitty, but they're screwing us over with trade. You know, we keep running these huge trade deficits with countries that are more or less on the same economic level. So what's the justification for having these huge trade deficits?
Well, I would say better than the United States, George.
Well, that's right. So, they have prosperity. If they have prosperity, and they make sure.
My summer in Berlin. Oh, I didn't know education was free. Oh, you know ways to get a free lunch. We're going to the dentist. I bet that's going to cost you. Oh no, it's free.
Yeah.
Okay. My grandmother's at a hospital right now getting a checkup. It's also free, Peter.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, George, it's much better.
It's much better. It's much better, and they managed to maintain a trade surplus with.
They make nice cars and pens still.
That's right. That's right. Now the Americans, and they published this very thick booklet on that day when he announced the reciprocal tariffs. The U.S. government published this very thick booklet listing all the America's grievances. I don't know whether they're all true, but nonetheless, that looks a pretty comprehensive list of grievances of unfair trading practices on the part of the Europeans against the United States. Now, if you're in this position, you're trying to drag America into this conflict with Russia, and you're throwing over the United States with trade, and you're threatening the United States. You're actually threatening. We're going to retaliate against you. Ursula von der Leyen, we're going to retaliate. We're ready to retaliate. And Trump says, who the hell are you to retaliate against anyone? I mean, we've got this damn alliance, which is, completely lopsided. We're getting into a conflict that I don't even understand what the hell's the point of this conflict. And you're going to retaliate against us. I think, the Europeans are not playing a strong hand here. And particularly with all these statements I just read out, that these are the things we're going to be doing. The last thing we want is any kind of a deal that Trump may or may not be able to negotiate. We don't want to have anything to do with this deal. I mean, you can see why Trump would be absolutely just enraged by this and take out his anger on the Europeans.
And there is no coherent logic to it. They want to inflict a political defeat on Trump. It has nothing to do with Ukraine.
No.
That's the idiocy of it all. Okay, that is the greatest disservice to men that have been dragged off the street, put into buses, and brought to the front. Okay, right. And I'm talking about Ukrainians. Okay,
right.
Okay, and also I think what's important to reiterate. It's so important is that you have this locomotive of the European elites determined to these people are terrified that the status quo could change, because you know what, if the status quo fails, there'll be pitchforks for them, and they may lose a lot more. They may lose their wealth, their prestige, their power, and their ability to bestow their wealth and power upon their children. That's what they want to do. Okay, they want. This is all class politics. Everybody, they're protecting their class. Okay, against everyone else. But this locomotive, they have their friends across the Atlantic, and they're working in tandem. Okay.
Yeah,
we've seen this before, and that's why George and I very often go back to the question: has Trump learned anything? And I think it's an important thread through all of our conversations.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's I think it was Laura Ingraham. I don't often quote Laura Ingraham, but I mean, I think she put it quite succinctly once. Somehow, the more I look at the Europeans, they keep saying that they're pro-American. I don't think they're pro-American. They're pro-Democrat.
Well, and they're PMCs. Okay, they have affinities for people that they're accredited certain institutions.
Right.
There's a lot of nepotism involved as well.
Right.
Okay, I mean, these people, we're modern, we're postmodern. No, these people are quite primitive. Okay, right. They look nice. They have nice coif. I mean, that's one of the things that they pull over you. Oh, that looks so sophisticated.
Right,
it's a nice Gucci bag. Okay.
Yes.
No, don't be fooled. Okay, because they treat you as a peasant. They treat you as a peasant.
That's right,
okay.
and that's what they did. I mean, they rejoiced. They openly rejoiced in November 2020 and rushed to declare Biden the winner of the race. And thank God Trump's gone. We're never going to have to see him again. And of course, they even initially plotted against him, particularly the British. And the British have walked away from this. The whole Christopher Steele thing. I mean, there still haven't been a proper reckoning. What was the role of the British government with Christopher Steele? The guy was a senior figure in the MI6. He didn't just he's not just some flaky guy doing whatever he's doing. So the British were involved in that. The British were among the worst. And they're waiting out Trump. They're sort of thinking, well, he'll be gone.
But there's a mistake.
Will be back.
But there's a huge mistake in that thinking. Elections have consequences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, you don't have to be a guru of American electoral politics. Okay, I'll go right to the core of it. There were 7 states, battleground states, that would make a difference. One side wins the most of the American electorate, almost all the vast majority of the voters actually don't matter in an American presidential election.
Right.
In this cycle, it was 7 states.
Right.
Trump won them all.
Right.
Elections have consequences.
That's right.
The electorate has spoken very clearly. And my criticism is that Trump isn't more focused.
No,
okay?
that's right. And I think that you should also say that he did win the popular vote as well. So
the popular,
like the popular vote. So that was because they used that argument against him during his first victory. Oh, well, he didn't win the popular vote, even though it's a silly argument because that's not how American politics counts. But this time you can't even use that argument. Elections have consequences. He's making drastic changes. Now the Europeans are absolutely hell-bent, determined that there'd not be any drastic changes because this transatlantic gravy train, this has been going on for 80 years. And for 80 years, they have been absolutely determined not to end the transatlantic gravy train.
George, over the weekend, some new polling came out. What's the most popular party in Germany?
Yeah, I know.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I saw it.
AfD, everyone.
That's right. And
after the election, the most popular political party is the opposition.
The opposition, the one that everyone says, no, you cannot come into the government. Absolutely not. You're the number one party. You cannot be in the government.
They're besieged. These people, these think tankers, transatlantic think tankers, are under siege. They're terrified. They're going to lose the gravy train.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Anyway, let's take a look at the Mertz, the new incoming chancellor. I think we're soon going to be missing.
He's done before he gets started, George.
I think so too. I mean, he's slumping in the polls. It's unheard of for somebody before he's even become chancellor. He's already slumping in the polls. I mean, that's why the AfD has overtaken the Christian Democrats. So it says Germany willing to send Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Chancellor in waiting denounces latest Russian attack. Says Kiev needs help to get ahead in the conflict.
Get ahead.
And it said Germany is willing to send Taurus long-range missiles to Ukraine. And then Kiev needs to put the front foot, force concessions from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Friedrich Mertz, who is set to take office as the leader of Europe's largest nation next month, denounced a Russian attack on the Ukrainian city of Sumy as a serious war crime. How does he know it's a war crime? And said that Kiev needed help to get ahead in the conflict. And then asked if he would follow through on a previous call to Germany to supply Ukraine with the Taurus missiles that Kiev has long asked for. He said that he would be willing to do so if done in coordination with European allies. And he said, our European partners are already supplying cruise missiles. The British are doing it, the French are doing it, and the Americans are doing it anyway.
And the Germans shouldn't do it.
Exactly. What applies to others doesn't apply to Germany.
George, you'll get to correct me, of course, but there's like a battalion of German troops now in Lithuania.
Lithuania, yeah.
Is it Lithuania?
5,000 troops, something like that.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's yes,
The
5,000.
German
Yes,
tanks are there German tanks in Ukraine? There are German troops in Lithuania.
right. Yes,
Wow.
very. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Lithuania. Yeah, yeah. And I want to come to the
But
question
where they
of
still have Waffen FS marches for celebrating their Nazi collaborators.
that's right. I want to come to the topic of Estonia in a moment because
Oh
that's
yes, that very important geopolitical country.
exactly. But we're so fortunate to have the point person of foreign affairs, the chief foreign affairs, the foreign minister of the European Union, who speaks on behalf of Europe, is an Estonian.
Yeah.
Uh, which I think it's a
The
great.
Barbie's Russophobe. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
right. And is imposing, not with a lot of resistance, imposing her insane Russophobia on the European continent. Anyway, he says, in reference to US President Donald Trump's efforts to ram through, I like this, ram through a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. This is the
Well,
Financial
I
Times.
mean, they never had a problem with Biden ramming through a proxy war against Russia, did they? They had no
No,
problem
not
with
at all.
that. They never
This
used that term,
ram through.
ramming through.
That's right. Mertz warned that Putin would not, quote, respond positively to weakness and peace offers. So no, we don't need no stinking peace offers. This is again German Chancellor talking like that. No,
Well,
no,
it
no.
was of June of last year that you got the very basics of Russia's approach to ending the conflict. June of
Right,
last year, and it's been repeated since then. So I don't know what Mertz is up to. Okay, maybe
right.
he doesn't strike me as a well-read man.
I don't think he is. I think he's just a money man. I mean, that's how he made his money. I mean, he worked at BlackRock for many years. I mean, that's what he's into. Clearly, an American man. I mean, he's America's
Yeah,
man. All those years working at BlackRock. The Americans got their boy in. The Americans never liked Schultz. Clearly, as always, they just don't like
yeah. I mean,
these social
Schultz is the type
democrats.
of character only his mother could love. I don't know how. Again, this level of mediocrity, and how do you
Yes,
end up at the top? It's extraordinary.
it is. It is
It is
extraordinary. Yeah.
truly extraordinary. Look at, and George and I got to not go through it here, but you know, we were, I would say, good students of post-war Europe.
Right.
Okay, there were a lot of very, very smart, talented,
Right.
innovative people
Right.
in Italy, in Germany, Austria, France. I mean, all over the place. Okay,
Right.
people that really had something to say, had a vision, and
Right.
then it just got all. There was an ideological capture,
Right. Right.
transatlantic capture,
Right.
and this is
Right.
what you get. You get people like Annalena Baerbock, and you get like
That's right.
Friedrich Mertz. I mean,
Yes. It's very,
if
very
they
strange.
traded clothes, you couldn't tell the difference between
No,
them.
no. It is very, very interesting that if one were to say, okay, well, name the top 6 politicians in Europe today. You say, well, I'd say Ursula von der Leyen and Annalena Baerbock and Kaya Kallas. That's 3 of them. You think, okay, so they are the top. That tells you a lot. That those are the 3 right away. And then you probably think of the Finn chick, though she's now gone.
Yeah, but they collectively they couldn't run on the legit anyway. They
Right.
couldn't
No,
legitimately run a popcorn stand. Okay, they'd lose money for sure.
they absolutely would. But it's actually quite chilling, when you see this kind of group photo with all these people, these Annalena Baerbock and then Ursula and then the Kaya Kallas, and they all look very pleased with themselves. And you think these are people staggeringly incompetent,
Yeah.
absolutely horrifically
Brought to you
incompetent.
by Gucci.
That's right. That's
That's
right.
all. That's all I see.
And then again, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, if one thinks back a couple of generations ago, you think, okay, you think of Pompidou. I mean, leave aside, all right, look at De Gaulle. Obviously, De Gaulle was a kind of a larger than life figure, but all right, but you had, Willy Brandt, you had Helmut Schmidt,
Adenauer.
Adenauer,
I mean,
Pompidou.
he was a force to contend with.
Yeah, you had that ubiquitous guy in Italy, Andreotti, who always seemed to be either prime minister or foreign minister. He was never out of the government. It was always either one or the other. But but he was there. I mean, he was a kind of a permanent fixture in
Well,
Italy.
Germany had some, Helmut Kohl was solid. He was a
That's
solid guy.
Helmut Kohl. That's right. Exactly. It was yeah, absolutely. And then in Britain you had some quite heavyweight politicians. I mean, you had Harold Macmillan, you had Harold Wilson, you had Margaret Thatcher. I mean, you had some substantial figures. Now you think of how many prime ministers? I think we've had 7 prime ministers in the last 10 years in the UK. They're all complete non-entities. The David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson, he's trying to channel his inner feminism. What?
Right? Yeah.
What?
That was That's right. That was I think William Hague. That
Oh,
strange
but
guy.
he looked like an alien to me.
He did. He kind of looked
He
a little
didn't
like
look humanoid. He didn't look humanoid to me.
no,
I
no,
asked many people. I mean,
no.
is this a head fake? Because this doesn't seem real.
Yeah, so they all kind of they're totally interchangeable, and you just can't remember them, other than when you now kind of recite them. But none of them made any impression whatsoever. Um, and I think it is a matter of this, absolutely ridiculousness of Europe. I look at Macron. What on earth is Macron playing at by continually bringing up all these ridiculous ideas about sending European forces into Ukraine? I mean, all right, he's obviously trying to sabotage any possibility of an agreement. But then, it just seems you're president of France. You've got this job. You've got 10 years. Don't you have anything more productive to be getting
Yeah,
on?
let's see. So, what is his plan for staying power? I put Le Pen in prison and put French troops in Ukraine.
That's
What
right.
could go wrong, George? What could
That's
go wrong?
exactly. That's right. So anyway, so here's then. So this is the Germany. We're going to do this. And then at some point, this is Merz talking. At some point, Putin must recognize the hopelessness of this war, which means we have to help Ukraine. So in other words, it's the same nonsense Stoltenberg has been spouting and NATO has been spouting. Oh, we're going to bomb Putin to the negotiating table. I mean, it hasn't worked, but we're going to do it. And then that's it. That's Mertz. Just won an election, and that's all he has to offer. But on Sunday, Mertz indicated not only that he was willing to supply Taurus missiles, but also suggested that they could be used to strike targets such as the Kerch Bridge that links Russia to Crimea and is seen as a symbol of Putin's occupation of the peninsula.
So what the incoming Chancellor of Germany is suggesting is that German missiles under the command of German officers, probably with American intelligence, is to strike sovereign Russia and kill people. Well, then the Russians may recalibrate on how they retaliate, which has already been hinted. Well, it's more than hinted, actually.
Right.
So here we go. George and again, we have to say it when we get it right. We were alone in saying, hold your hats, everybody, because we can continue escalating. We can escalate, and this is it. This is it. On my own program, 2 very prominent people. Oh, Peter, no, that's not going to happen. This thing is going to be wound up in 3 weeks.
No. That's right. So in the meantime, because I said we'll talk about Estonia, Estonia's doing some very, very interesting things. First of all, it's saying it's prohibiting any links between the Russian Orthodox Church in Estonia and the Moscow Patriarchate.
I didn't know this.
Okay. Yes, that's right. They're just prohibited.
Before Easter. Okay.
Exactly. And you think, hey, whoa, what about separation of church and state? European Union values, nothing. We already talked about Estonia saying, hey, you can't vote in elections. Russians who've been living there all their lives in Estonia, they can't vote in elections. Now they've adopted legislation of seizing ships in international waters. And they've done it. They seized a ship in international waters the other day. Naturally, the media have taken Estonia's side, but it is very interesting the escalation that Estonia is now engaged in. I mean, it's like they're going out of their way to try to provoke a Russian attack.
They're
And
going out of their way to provoke Donald Trump.
going out of the but yes, going out of their way to Donald Trump, and then this again is what Donald Trump should be saying, addressing. Look, you got to knock it off, but he hasn't. Maybe he hasn't yet hit his radar screen. But here then is here's the story. In the first, Estonia, this is it's in the Moscow Times, but it was a wire story. And first, Estonia detains Russian shadow fleet tanker. They always talk about this shadow fleet. And it says Estonia has detained a Russia linked, whatever that means, marking the Baltic countries' first maritime operation targeting the so-called shadow fleet transporting Russian oil in violation of Western sanctions.
Which do not have any legal standing.
None
None.
whatsoever. They have no legal standing. Therefore, you have no right at all to attack any kind of shipping anywhere because you're not in any way enforcing a UN Security Council mandated sanctions. The vessel was intercepted in the early hours of Friday near Egna Islands in Muuga Bay as it sailed through Estonian territorial waters. As we'll see, that seems to be very murky whether it was actually in Estonian territorial waters, en route to the Russian port of Ust-Luga. Authorities stopped the ship to verify its documentation and legal status. And the tanker, identified as the Kiwala, was reportedly operating under the flag of Djibouti, according to vessel tracking service. However, at the time of the detention, it was not flying a national flag, a violation of maritime law. The crew later produced a flag certificate, but a representative for Djibouti's maritime authority denied that the ship was listed in its national registry. Well, all of this sounds very strange. I mean, first of all, they say they have a flag certificate, and then they claim this wire story claims, oh, the Djibouti it's not listed in its national registry. And then Estonian transportation authorities are now inspecting the ship's structure and reviewing its documentation to ensure it poses no threat to maritime safety.
Well, I mean, what's the probable cause?
Right. Exactly. That's the point. What's the probable cause? That's exactly what I wonder. They say they're looking at the documentation. Well, what was the reason why you boarded the ship? You just say, well, now you're doing a documentation. Well, there's no probable cause. That's exactly what a fishing expedition is. You have no probable cause to someone, and then you try to start looking for some documentation. And then the Kiwala is now under the guard of 3 Estonian naval vessels. And then it says Veiko Komusa, deputy chief, blah, blah, confirmed that the tanker is sanctioned by the EU. It also has been sanctioned by the UK, Canada, and Switzerland. And then, sorry, that's the wrong one.
Again, these sanctions are not recognized under any international law whatsoever. They just say it.
They say it, exactly. It's not in the slightest. And then here, and then it says, on board were 24 third country individuals. The ship's captain, a Chinese national, cooperated with Estonian authorities. The rest of the people on board were preliminarily identified as citizens of Mauritania. So, where's the Russia connection? Okay, where's Ivan Popov? Or some Russian here. So we have the ship's captain, a Chinese national. It's registered under Djibouti. and then the people on board are citizens of Mauritania. The War and Sanctions noted that the Kiwala was previously commanded by a man named Sergei Harchenko. So, and the previously commanded, okay, that's fascinating information. The vessel is owned by Tiraj Shipping, a Mauritius registered company whose fleet consists of the Kiwala. The tanker previously
solely of the koala.
Yeah, and then
how
the
can you
tanker
have how can you have a fleet if there's only one?
exactly. So that's yes, yeah.
I don't think the editor proofread this article.
I don't think so. That's right. Solely of the Kiwala. The tanker previously belonged to Turkish and Indian shipping firms.
How is this helping us understand?
I'm sorry. This is really interesting. But you've now said Russian shadow fleet.
Did you see Being There with Peter Sellers?
Yes.
And so Peter Sellers, he's the gardener, and when his boss, the guy that employed him, he died. Peter Sellers, Chauncey Gardner, started wearing his clothes. He looked like a pretty important guy, and so they're trying to find out who the guy that died was, and the only thing they could find out was, well, he had very expensive. They were Brooks Brothers, and he bought them in 1956, October 7th to be exact. His car make was a Buick, had 27,000 miles. And they're like, so who is this guy? You know a lot about him. You know who this guy is, and what's his connection to Chauncey Gardner? This is exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
great film.
Yes, Melvin Douglas played the old man. Was a great actor. So then we look at another story, because this story doesn't clear up anything.
Is this story going to have more illuminating facts?
Not really, other than the certain contradictions. I mean, because and then it says the detention comes 2 days after the Estonian parliament passed legislation granting the country's defense forces the authority to use force against vessels in the Baltic Sea if they are found to pose a threat to national security.
And that is defined as?
Well, I mean, that is it's piracy, but it's also basically a warlike act, because they are saying we can seize civilian ships who are not engaged in any kind of warlike action if we deem these civilian ships to be a threat to national security. That's a warlike act. You can't just simply go ahead and seize civilian ships, which is what this was, a civilian ship. The law was passed in response to a rise in suspected sabotage incidents. And we've talked a lot about these suspected sabotage incidents. Not once has any proof been presented that there was any sabotage involved, including damage to undersea cables and critical infrastructure, which Estonian officials believe is orchestrated by Russian intelligence services. And then
but Estonia was first in line to try to find out what happened in Nord Stream, right?
That's right, exactly. They were the first line, exactly. They rushed to find out. But notice, they say this was orchestrated by the Russian intelligence service. And then you say, okay, well, first of all, who the hell cares what the Estonian intelligence services say? I mean, that what intelligence services do they have? Do they have any evidence? Just saying they believe something. Well, I believe this. That's nothing. That's not proof of anything.
All this is to whip up more hysteria. Estonia. I've been there. It's a nice little country, and it's little. I mean, if you're on the train, don't fall asleep, because you could pass through Estonia and not know it. Okay, so be awake when you're on the train. Okay,
that's right.
Nice cafes, Tallinn, great little town. They want to be leading the parade. That's what they want to do. They want to lead the parade to take down Trump, not to take down Putin. Take down Trump. Always remember this, everybody.
That's right.
And so when the Estonians show up at a NATO meeting or something, you're like, oh, wow, the Estonians are vigilant people. Yes, not many of them, but
Right.
they all look the same too. But they're at the forefront of this
Yes.
coalition of the willing.
That's right. That's right. It's very interesting. I mean, how this Kaya Kallas got that job. Remember, Kaya Kallas wanted to be NATO Secretary General. I mean, she was lobbying for that, and I think that was just a bridge too far. I think the Biden people thought, no, this really is a little dangerous to have this nutcase head of
So give
NATO.
her a job where she can make a lot of noise. Nobody takes her seriously. No one took Joseph Borrell seriously. No one. I mean, George and I were very grateful for
Right.
his tenure. I mean,
Yes.
the material we got out of that guy. I mean, very few people are in that category. Very few make it
Yes.
that far.
That's right. Yes.
But she's proving her worth. Okay.
she, I mean, she's nicer looking. I have to say she's nicer looking than Borrell.
Well, I don't know. Did you see the picture? I think it was Politico, funded by USAID, had Callas and Ursula von der Fuhrer. Oh, I'm sorry.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw the picture. Yeah.
Well, that's such a cool picture, huh? Okay.
That's right. Yeah,
The world is in your hands. Okay.
Yeah,
Be confident.
That's right. Yeah, they kind of striding side by side.
Smiling at each other.
That's right. And Kaya Kallas,
It kind of was like a Thelma and Louise thing, I thought.
a little bit. There was a little bit. But Kaya Kallas is always striding. I don't know how many photographs you see of her. She's always striding somewhere. I think she's so filled with her great self-importance, and she's always striding somewhere. Whereas Ursula, she does look a little scary. And she just when she walks around with that jacket and those pants.
Yeah, but she's got the writing.
Exactly. That
She's
she's riding
That's
crop.
why you never see her hands. She's got the writing.
Yeah. I am absolutely. She was born into money. She married a rich husband. I'm sure she has many horses in her stable, and I'm sure she has lots and lots of riding crops.
And peasants. And
peasants to beat when they fall out of
You make
line.
them dress in that traditional garb, okay?
That's right. She looks like the time she does beat the peasants who fall out of
Yeah.
line.
Yeah. Christy Nome, you got nothing on her.
That's right. So here then, this is the next article here, and it says Politico says Estonia seizes Russian shadow tanker in the Baltic Sea.
They didn't even put quotes on it, did they?
That's right. The
It's
ghost.
transcended. It's
That's right.
transcended.
That's right.
It used to be shadow tanker. Now it's no quotes.
That's right. But interesting that we read that story, and I didn't see anything about any shadow tanker. I mean, where was the oil? I mean, have they discovered any oil on this tanker?
Good point. Where was the oil? Good.
Yeah, no mention of oil.
Nothing gets past George. Okay.
Yeah, nothing, not a thing. Exactly. So Estonian authorities detained and boarded a ship in the Baltic Sea, blah, blah. The vessel, and this is the prime minister saying this, the vessel, which Mikhail said did not sail under any nation's flag, but was previously registered to Djibouti. Now, notice it also says in the Baltic Sea. It does not say it was in the territorial waters. It just says in the Baltic Sea. And they're previously registered to Djibouti. How do they know this? How do they know this was previously registered? Just by they saw it out in the Baltic Sea, and they knew this was previously registered at Djibouti. According to publicly available records, was detained near Tallinn Bay in an operation involving helicopters. And so Mikhail then said, early this morning, the Estonian Navy detained a sanctioned vessel with no flag state. Our authorities are currently on board inspecting its legal status and safety. Again, what's the probable cause? The ship was heading to the port of Ust-Luga, a key Russian seaborne oil port in the Baltic Sea. Moscow commands a vast fleet of oil-exporting tankers in the Baltic Sea, which it uses to circumvent Western sanctions, and Kiev's allies say help fund its war against Ukraine. None of that has any legal standing whatsoever. I mean, you can say what you like, but none of Western sanctions have no legal standing, and so just reporting it as if somehow And the way they present it as if, well, these are international sanctions that are being violated.
No such thing.
No such thing. The ghost vessels often have no flags, a violation of international maritime law, and dubious documentation, with some suspected of being involved in acts of sabotage on the seabed. So again,
Did they interview anyone in the crew?
No, it doesn't look like it.
It doesn't look like, there's only one side to the story, isn't there?
They always
no
just,
is there any nuance here?
no, it's always
Because,
one
George,
side.
when you look at all of these stories, nuance is there. Okay.
Yes.
Really,
Yes.
seriously.
Well, exactly. I mean,
they had it was a few weeks ago. Well, all of these underwater mishaps. Well, there actually is no evidence. That was
right.
I'm
no,
paraphrasing
exactly.
like the New York Times.
That's right. Exactly. There's no evidence, and then the question immediately asks, well, is this unusual? Is it unusual for damage to undersea cables? How, is in other words, have there really been an unusual number of damage to undersea cables in the Baltic Sea, or rather, is this a regular thing and always has been a regular thing, given how heavily trafficked the Baltic Sea is? And then it says, it is said, Estonian border police official says, it's no secret that over the past year, a number of vessels have appeared in the Gulf of Finland that sail without proper documentation, and it can be stated quite clearly that this is part of the shadow fleet. So what's the issue here? That it doesn't have proper documentation? We were told a moment ago that, well, there was this whole thing about, well, this is a threat to our national security, therefore we can seize any ships we like. Then we have the sanctions, it's violating sanctions. Now the issue apparently is the proper documentation, because we're real sticklers about documentation.
And we're not hearing the other side. Maybe there is documentation and they don't
exactly. I want to know that.
Overlook it.
That's right. That's what you want to know. Well,
here are documentation. I don't see those papers in your hand. Do you see them? I don't see any papers here. Right. He's got. Look, George and I have been chronicling lie after lie after lie. Why is it going to change now?
That's right. That's right. And then Western authorities have stepped up efforts to seize illegal tankers. They're not illegal, and have even mulled sinking them. Mull. I love the word mull. Mull sinking civilian tankers. Well, I mean that's a warlike act.
That's murder.
Yeah, you want to do some mulling. I mean, that's a warlike act.
Well, you do some mulling and you could get mauled.
Exactly. Estonia's parliament approved a new law Wednesday allowing the country's navy to use it. It's very convenient. So they approve a law on Wednesday, and then on Friday they seize the ship. Purely coincidental. No connection. Approve a new law Wednesday allowing the country's navy to use, quote, military force, unquote, on commercial vessels suspected of posing a, quote, threat, unquote, to its subsea critical infrastructure. So they decided this ship posed a threat to its. How do you determine that? There it is. It's in the Baltic Sea, and you determine that it's a threat to your subsea critical infrastructure. Finnish authorities detained another tanker in December, suspecting it had sabotaged a subsea power link connecting Estonia to Finland. And I remember that, and that was in December. Have you actually provided any evidence that it did sabotage anything? And then here we have the Moscow Times again. Estonia says Russian shadow fleet tanker can't sail without resolving 40 deficiencies. And then the authorities said on Saturday that they will not allow an oil tanker to belong to Russia's shadow fleet to pursue its journey until it had resolved various legal and safety issues. Where's the oil? I mean, it's an oil tanker. Was there any oil there? The Kiwala tanker was detained Friday in the Gulf of Finland in order to check its papers, which revealed that the boat is stateless. 2 days earlier, the Estonian parliament passed the authority to use force against vessels in the Baltic Sea if they are found to pose a threat to national security. It's amazing how, again, Estonia is a NATO member state. Estonia is an EU state, and no one has anything to say on the idea of the Estonian parliament declaring that they have a right to attack civilian shipping in international waters. Hey, doesn't anyone have anything to say about that? Does anyone in NATO, anyone in Washington say that, hey, we don't really want to go down this path of seizing
I mean,
ships?
it's going up the Article 5 escalation ladder.
Of course.
That's there.
That's right.
And looking at all this, Estonia is a very insignificant country. Okay, let's face it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but they are saying, well, we're detaining Russian ships. I mean, maybe you should send troops to Ukraine. Okay.
Right.
This is they're playing their role. That's all they're doing.
Right. That's right. That's right. Right. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly what the role that they're playing, and they're hoping essentially to provoke a war. I mean, they're trying to provoke a conflict, and then hey, it's Article 5, because they know that if there is anything, any kind of conflict with Russia, boom, all the Europeans, especially the UK, will start screaming, "That's it! This is Russian aggression against a NATO member state. Article 5 must go into operation." And the only ones who might just say, hold it, are the Americans, because everything is about the Americans.
Well, Estonia could be incinerated in about 4 minutes.
Of course. So that's the thing, and you have to wonder with Estonia, who's pushing this? You have to think that somebody's behind this. Somebody's kind of pushing the Estonians to behave in this way.
Never would have thought that we'd be dealing with rabid Estonians. This is a new category, a new category of rabidness in Europe. The rabid Estonian could go down in history. Okay.
Yes, the rabid Estonian, and then it says this Christian True, director of the Maritime Department, that said 40 problems have been detected with the boat, 23 of them having to do with documentation, and the rest involving its seaworthiness.
And this is all threatening the national security of NATO.
Exactly. So you talk about national security. Now there is some documentation. You haven't filled in the paperwork in the proper way. You're using the wrong color ink. We're
working in the area of font violations.
Yeah, exactly. Because let's say you want 23 of them having to do with documentation. Wow, documentation. I mean, that's really that's strict. And then documents produced during the initial inspection indicated that Kiwala was sailing under the Djibouti flag, but the East African country quickly responded by saying it had deregistered the tanker.
When?
When did it deregister the tanker?
We got a problem here. Delete.
That's right. Yeah, deregistered. Yeah, just in time. We deregistered. The vessel is currently anchored in La and remains under surveillance by the Estonian Navy.
Well, I hope they're feeding the guys. I hope they're feeding them.
Well, what is he doing? Surveillance? What does that mean? The Kiwala is under sanctions from Canada, the European Union, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. Why is Switzerland sanctioning it?
Switzerland is a very important maritime power. You know that.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. It's because Switzerland is well known for its powerful navy. And was on its way to the Russian port, blah, blah. Security analysts say Russia is operating a shadow fleet of hundreds of vessels seeking to dodge sanctions imposed on its oil export over the war in Ukraine. And then here, let's say, this Commissar said the boat's captain was Chinese. Most of the 24-member crew from either China or Mauritania. The Ukrainian sanctions monitoring portal, War and Sanctions, noted that the Kiwala was previously commanded by a man named Sergei Karchenko. Wow, I mean, this is really, really interesting. And
I just have to think either one person wrote all of these articles, which is possible. it is possible, okay? Or the three people that did it, they had a Zoom call. I mean, do you know
Yes,
anything else? Well,
that's
we
right.
got this Sergey guy. Oh, really? Okay,
That's
how do you spell that last name?
That's right, exactly. Well, you got to put in a Russian name, even though that's a Ukrainian name. But you put in. Oh, now we've got a Russian link here. So that's the that this is a bizarre, totally bizarre thing. Other than somebody, so we talked about we have Mertz saying we're going to send the Taurus missiles, completely provocative. You have this meeting, Ramstein, yeah, we're going to send 23 billion, whatever, and now you have Estonia, seizing ships, and then in the meantime you have the coalition of the willing. They have these regular meetings, planning the deployment of forces. We're gonna plan the deployment of
And
forces
they're
as
all running,
peacekeepers.
and it all appears they're running Keith Kellogg to top it all
And
off.
yes, and then Keith Kellogg. But just going back to what we were saying, Keith Kellogg, I think that is showing Trump's kind of weakness. I mean, he made that step. He sidelined Keith Kellogg, but he felt, obviously, I don't know, guess he felt bad for him. He's an 80-year-old man. Served his country. I don't know if he's a 3-star or 4-star general. Served his country. I don't want to just fire him, so I'll give him a gig. Oh, you're our man to Ukraine. But he's obviously just the worst possible person to be a point man in Ukraine.
See, this is the minutia of it all here, and I'll be honest and fair. When Trump when Trump and Putin had their first phone call, of course, George and I wanted to see a glimmer of hope here. But we've been really very skeptical. Where's the beef? Because we don't see any. I'll say it again for the 1,000th time. Improving the Russian-American bilateral relationship is not going to solve Europe's security problems. It's just not going to do it. It's not enough. Okay? And this is why you see, at least publicly, Trump showing impatience. Marco Rubio always falls back into his neocon genetic code.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And so what I see is I wouldn't say power struggle, because I don't think Trump would allow that, but an influence struggle going on. They want to. Again, if there's an article, Marco Rubio has no problems with Steve Witkoff, that means he does have a problem with him. Okay, why is the article written? Think about it logically.
But I think so.
Bump him off. Okay.
Well, of course, but look, even on his face,
60 Minutes did a hit job on him yesterday.
Right.
I didn't see. I saw like a sliver. Okay.
Yeah, but even on his face, I mean, you have the Secretary of State, who should be the person who's handling negotiations with Russia or with Iran, and yet it's all being handled by Steve Witkoff. So you think, well, any Secretary of State would raise objections. Hey, I'm the foreign policy person. I should be handling all foreign policy. But that's not the way Trump. Instead, Trump delegates Steve Witkoff.
Or to reinforce our overriding thesis, Marco Rubio is more than happy to see Steve Witkoff because he wants him to fail at both.
No, I agree. And I think that he is. He's laying the groundwork, as we've said many times before. He's laying the groundwork for his eventual departure. I think he'll probably depart after the midterms, and then gradually he'll start offering a critique, first gently, but then more assertively, a critique of Trump's foreign policy. He said, I was kind of marginalized, and this is unfortunately, Trump had great ideas. I like him very much, but he's just. That's just not the way to go. We need to keep in with our allies. We need to keep in with Ukraine. He's laying the groundwork for his presidential run. So that's why I think he's keeping a low profile, not to be associated. He doesn't want to be associated with Trump, other than a kind of a good soldier, but waiting for the moment
sitting
to
in the
depart.
middle of the couch.
That's right. In the middle of the couch, say nothing. I mean, it's like, I mean, I've never come across any secretary of state who just has nothing to say. I mean, whatever it is, he has nothing to say. Anyway, we have a few commenters on our locals page. These are the people who come to the locals page and they keep, the dogs, somehow in clover. They know that the dogs get very angry that they're not remunerated sufficiently. So the people come to our locals page and say, we've got to do something about the dogs. So we appreciate that. So we have NKMRD says, "Good evening. Russian vibes in the heaven. Russian vibes haven't changed much. It's hard to tell. They would go for the war mood until the very last day. Whether they go ahead with that or not in the EU. No, I think that they haven't yet, and I think I think we obviously at this stage still have to wonder how things will develop with Trump. Trump is obviously is mercurial. It's clear from the statements and the statement that we had, the one that he made in Air Force One, he wants this war ended. Now, how he does it and whether he's kind of figured out how to do it, but I think if you put the totality of all the things he said, he clearly wants this to come to an end. I mean, even talking like this is Biden's war, that's pretty strong words. So far, nothing much has changed, but I think we still have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, so far there isn't much change.
Well, there's every indication that Russia's reinforced its forces of the special military operation and is pushing, and it can start pushing harder and faster. That's the word here. I want to point out to everyone, because mainstream media is so fundamentally dishonest, is that, or I'll throw this to George. So George, historically, when has there been a ceasefire and then a peace agreement? It's usually a peace agreement and then there's a ceasefire.
No, I think that they tried to do these things, but they never really worked. I mean, during the Bosnian War, there was a ceasefire, but it didn't serve any purpose because, of course, what happened, as always happens, the ceasefire was used by NATO to arm the Muslims and the Croats to mount their offensive against the Serbs. So the Serbs really shouldn't, they agreed to a ceasefire when they were on the offensive, when they were on the front foot. They gave their opponents a ceasefire, and the ceasefire was, of course, used against the Serbs. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a bad idea, if you're on the front foot, to allow your adversary to recover. So yeah,
and there again, to kind of reiterate, what part of the genetic code of this entire podcast is that give me one reason why the Russians should trust anything NATO has to say at all about anything, even the weather. Okay.
No,
look at the machinations with the Estonians and these ships. I mean, they're getting desperate, really desperate.
No, I think, and I'm trying to think about the Vietnam. As we were saying, Nixon was trying different things. The one thing that was never tried in Vietnam, they never had any ceasefires. There were never ceasefires. And in fact, if one thinks of 1972, which was that decisive year, it was the North Vietnamese who decided to push things in that year to achieve a decisive victory. It didn't achieve a decisive victory, and then that helped the negotiations in Paris. But no one really thought, well, let's have a ceasefire, because what's the point of a ceasefire? Why would anyone? What is the point of it? What are you trying to accomplish? So yeah, right.
The U.S. Navy vet says George has lost his mind if he thinks little Marco has a chance to become the next president. I'm not saying, I don't think George is saying he will.
I never said that. Exactly. I never said that.
I think you said in our last podcast, or maybe you said it to me offline, is that there's no way in the world he will ever be elected president.
Yeah, absolutely. No. What I do think is that he's very ambitious and that he's going to make another run for president. I think that's without question. He gave up a seat a nice seat in Florida, a Florida Senate seat. You don't give up something like that unless you're going to go for something bigger, because it's going to be very hard to get back into to the Senate. So I absolutely imagine that he's going to run. I don't think he's going to win because I don't think he commands who he has ever commanded authority. I mean, he always looks like a schoolboy. I mean, he always looks like this rather.
Well,
I mean,
and he's just a creature of lobbies.
yes.
He doesn't have any zero charisma. Okay,
Right.
zero.
No, none at all. None. I mean, he's got
Okay,
a nice kind of boyish.
he's not a man of the people.
No.
I mean, he doesn't even present himself as one.
No,
He's,
not at all.
he's an elite. He's proud. This PMC elite. Okay,
Yeah.
he left the peasantry. Okay,
Right. Yeah,
and
thanks.
the last thing he wants to do is to rub shoulders with peasants again.
Yes, that's right. That's it. He just has a kind of pleasant, boyish good looks. But that's about it. That's all you can say. Otherwise, he has never said anything of the slightest interest. Always been extremely ambitious. Remember he entered the Senate in 2010 as part of the Tea Party. Then as soon as he entered the Tea Party, he abandoned.
Abandon that, okay?
He abandoned
Rubio will be forever mistaken for a waiter.
That's right, exactly. So that's then remember he enters in 2010, and then he signs on, and no one's ever forgotten this. He signed on to Obama's amnesty bill, the immigration amnesty bill. Foolishly, after signing on to that immigration bill, he decided to run for president in 2016. Well, everyone's obviously was rammed down his throat. Hey, you signed on to Obama's immigration amnesty, so that put pay to him. But somehow, and I don't understand how this happened, he wormed his way into Trump's good graces after the really bad-tempered 2016 race. Somehow he found himself in Trump's good graces.
No,
so he obviously has a knack of ingratiating himself.
Trump is the next ladder to climb. That's all.
Yes.
That's all it is.
Right.
That's all it is. Nothing more. Nothing more. And plus, he needs daylight from Trump if he's going to run against J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
Exactly. And J.D. Vance, he's very much a novice, but he's said and done some things that really disappoint me. I always preface this. I liked him very much before he got into politics. I will always say that. But this is the Game of Thrones right now, because J.D. Vance, keeping a moderately low profile because he doesn't want to make mistakes, which is smart, particularly around a very unpredictable president. Okay, he scored a lot of points with the base in the Oval Office with Zelensky. I mean, that guy was like,
no, he's definitely
he became authentic. He's MAGA world accepted him. Why do you think he said that, everyone? He was talking to Trump's base. He doesn't give a hoot about Zelensky.
That's of course not. But now on the question of Israel, and you say, I mean, obviously you can say he's disappointing, but nobody can have any hope of a political career in American politics, in the Democratic Party, but above all in the Republican Party, by being a critic of Israel's. I mean, the only person who does that, the only person who's ever criticized Israel and says, I don't want to have anything to do with it, is Thomas Massie.
Yep.
And Thomas Massie, I think he's very much his own man. He's very brave. And Trump, in reward, said, I'm going to primary him. I'm going to primary Thomas Massie. So that's Thomas Massie's reward. So that's why I would cut Vance a little bit of slack on the question of Israel. It's like, hey, if you're ambitious, you're planning to have a career, you can't, you don't touch
look, everyone, that is the poverty, the moral poverty of our time. Okay, I accept George's critique. I'm still disgusted by American foreign policy vis-a-vis Israel, but George is absolutely right. If you're going to make your way into high politics in the United States, there are third rails, and it's sad. It's a sad truth.
That's right. And then we have NKMRD says Friedrich Mertz already announced that Germany should be more motivated and energetic and a little bit more like the USA. I don't know if people feel inspired by that, but it's worth trying. Not much to lose. Well, except that if you're going to
You've got a lot
find,
to lose, I'm
you
afraid.
have a lot to lose, and if you're going to use debt to finance in
In
this
Germany.
military spending in Germany, that's not a good idea.
I mean,
Um,
if they were going to go into debt to cure cancer, I'd give them some slack.
right.
Revving up to go to war with Russia? No.
Right, that's right. And then we have Marx 2023 who says, "Hey George, round two of the tariff war with China. Trump capitulation is becoming a daily event. Besson and Lutnick are complete fools regarding their understanding of the Chinese economy. Yes, they are rich. We too could be rich with access to insider trading. The Chinese economy is a real economy, unlike the fake economy. Well, fake American economy. I don't agree with that. Obviously, I don't think that they're capitulating. And as I've said before, China has a real problem. I mean, you have whenever you're running a huge trade surplus, and particularly if your economic model is dependent on access to the American market, which is what China does, you're always vulnerable. You're always going to be vulnerable to a country saying, "Well, we've had enough. We don't want to do it." So that's why I don't think that. I mean, obviously these are early days. I don't think that China's going to win this trade war against the United States. I think the United States is just much stronger. It could get nasty. There are going to be nasty uh, detours along the way. But I don't think China can win a trade war against the United States.
For me, the verdict is out. There's so many moving parts here.
Yeah.
China has a lot of other markets in the world. I think Xi is in Vietnam today. Okay, he's on a 3-country Asian tour. He's shoring up China's interest. This is going to be long. It's going to be painful. There's going to be a lot of unexpected outcomes. I'm not even sure what it means to win, to be honest with you. That's where I am right now.
No, that's a very good point. But and I mean, that's why I think there's going to be some kind of a deal struck down the road.
Oh, yeah.
There has to be a deal struck down the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the problem again that China has is that yes, there are other markets, but the other markets are also not going to be particularly receptive to China just dumping its excess capacity in their markets. The Europeans aren't going to say, well, that's okay, fine. You can't sell in America anymore, so you can sell in Europe. And in Asia, they're not going to sell. Oh, that's fine. You can dump your goods here.
It's going to be a long slog. It's going to be a long slog because Trump wants to reset the table. Well, everybody else is going to have to do it too. Okay, so we see where it goes. It's just way too early. It's way too early.
I think so.
And Trump is already making a lot of exceptions and stuff like that. So let's see where this goes. Let's just see where.
Well, that's right. Yeah. But I mean, Howard Lutnick now said over the weekend is that no, there are not going to be any exemptions on this.
But then some electronics and iPhones.
Yeah, but I said okay, but we're gonna come up with new sanctions on semiconductors, and then that all this is going to become under semiconductors. I mean, and Trump has kept a lot of the sanctions still on. I mean, there's still the 20% on Chinese stuff.
I'm looking at all of the comments coming in here. I agree with all of you. That's where we are. I don't know.
Okay. It's exactly. It's a very. I mean, it's a very interesting situation, and as I've said, I think that America had to address this issue. I mean, it was always going to have to address it. You can't go on running budget deficits, trade deficits, growing, ever burgeoning debt.
For 80 years.
Yeah, you just can't do it. It's just not a sustainable economic model. At some point, the United States would have to do something about it. So, but that's right, and it's going to be a painful process. It's like 80 years. Now you're trying to change it. It's not going to be smooth sailing. Anyway, well, I think it's time for us to depart. And you have any closing thoughts?
Remember,
Peter?
everyone, George and I are the real contrarians here. Okay? We're the real ones. Okay? There's a lot of people out there I like, but don't get ahead of your skis. That's some good
Yes.
advice.
I think so. Yeah, exactly. Don't start. It's going to be like this. This is what's going to
It's
happen.
going to be
I know
like
what's
this.
going
It's
to
going to be
happen.
like this.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. No, that's not. Anyway, thank you everybody who's joined us. Thank you all for your excellent questions. Thank you those who contributed something to the dog's tip jar. That's going to put them in a slightly better mood. And we're going to be back next Monday at the same time, Easter Monday. So we're gonna do that. And tomorrow I'm doing my live stream solo, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Please join me. Come with all your comments, criticisms, questions, and until then, all the best, everybody. Bye bye.